Over the weekend, Stetson Bennett proved to me why he will not be an elite NFL quarterback. And that is a couple of things. One, I've said this from the beginning. The guy seems like he's standing on third base and thinks he hit a triple when, in all honesty, he was walked around the bases. I think he's marvelous in the fourth quarter. I don't want to take anything away from him and what he did, but the Georgia quarterback was arrested for public intoxication. Now, that's not the end of the world. Trust me, we've all done stupid stuff. But for pounding on doors and Stetson Bennett arrested, and the coverage was through the roof. They had video of him coming outside of the jailhouse, which I thought was a little over the top. But we're talking about players nowadays that are more mature. They're getting paid NIL money, so you treat them a little bit different than we used to. So that's fine. I just thought the media coverage was strange. But the thing that stands out to me about Stetson Bennett is that he would have been reporting to the Senior Bowl on Saturday. He passed on the Senior Bowl. So he thinks he's too good for the Senior Bowl, and that's every man's decision. I get that. Hendon Hooker will be a part of it, but Stetson Bennett needs to be in the Senior Bowl. Stetson Bennett needs to be out there because he's got size working against him. He is not as talented as some quarterbacks that have had issues before him, like Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield. Stetson Bennett proved to me by both the decision not to play in the Senior Bowl, which came last week, by his decision to put himself in a bad situation. Listen, you should. This is your. Imagine if you could set up your family's financial tree for generations. This is the most important 4 months in your life before the draft, 3.5 months. This is where you should be in Arizona, someplace. Alcohol, and I've got nothing against alcohol. Alcohol or marijuana, drugs, anything should be the furthest thing from your mind, and you put yourself in a position where you're intoxicated and you're beating on doors. And let's be honest, you have to be pretty intoxicated. So maybe he was supposed to meet a girl or something. I don't know why he was beating on multiple doors. But at some point when the cops get there, if you can hold your junk together and you can just say, hey, my bad, I was looking for my girlfriend. I'm sorry, I'll just go home. So they'll let you go most of the time, right? So in this case, you had to be so intoxicated that you smarted off or something else, and they're like, hey, you got to go. So straight to jail. That to me is an incredibly bad sign of a guy that does not have the ability of a Baker Mayfield, does not have the ability of a Johnny Manziel. I don't expect him to have much of an impact in the NFL at all based off what I've seen the past week.
Yeah, I'm so mixed on this because I hate to be the old school guy of, oh my God, you should never be caught drinking. You're a professional athlete. Like, I'm not that person. But I'm with you. It's one thing to like get arrested for public intoxication. When I first saw it and I saw he was in Dallas and I saw the video, which I only saw that clip of the video where they went after him. I'm sorry, my first gut reaction was TCU, Dallas. Is this just a revenge arrest? That was the first thing that came through my mind. But then I'm with you. When I read that he was banging on doors, on every door throughout a block, I'm like, okay, I get if you're 18 and you do that. Stetson Bennett's 25. And I'm not trying to like say every person's situation was the same, but like I remember how stupid I was at 18 and how stupid I was at 25. And I was a heck of a lot smarter at 25 than I was at 18. And I think I was smart enough at 25 to know that even if I got totally hammered, I wouldn't bang on doors on every block. And
to me, the timeline was a little bit different. I was still stupid at 21 or 22. But at about 22, 23 is when I got serious and said, hey, it's time to be an adult. And so, but anyway, that's kind of how society, I think our American society raises us right now, Caleb, is that you're not really an adult till you get out of college, which we could debate whether or not that's good, bad, or indifferent. But you're right. It doesn't matter. He's past that point. He's done with his 18 years of college. He's probably has an AARP card. He's old enough to where you've just got to know better and not put yourself in that situation. And listen, I can guarantee you this is why we're going to judge college athletes differently than we did before. With NIL money and the money he's already gotten from an agent, because I'm sure he's already signed, He could have the biggest, funnest party at his house on a Saturday night because he had a great week of training if he wanted to. He chose not to do that and put himself in a very bad position. I have little optimism that Stetson Bennett will have a successful NFL career.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's not forget, you're right. He doesn't. Not only does he not have the skill set of Johnny Manziel or Baker Mayfield, he's a heck of a lot older than him too. No one's really drafting Stetson Bennett for a 3-year project, and that's a big thing working against him. His best selling point would have been his character and his work ethic. That's the thing. That's why you and I probably both somewhat believe in Hendon Hooker, that he has a chance. Now, Hooker's got a lot of issues that he needs to work on. Not personal, but just skill level wise for the NFL. But I think a lot of teams are going to take a chance on him, even though he's a bit older, because even though he has those issues, they trust his work ethic. They trust his intangibles. We just talked about Tyler Bray. I thought Tyler Bray was the best NFL prospect to ever come out of Tennessee in football. When you look at his arm was incredible. I've never seen I don't think anybody has ever had an arm like Tyler Bray at Tennessee. I don't know if you can name somebody, but he didn't even get drafted because of his intangibles. And
if you want to include release time, that would put him over Joe Milton to me. So yeah, I'm not going to argue with that point. I mean, as an overall quarterback, there were much better prospects, but as far as just natural God-given arm whip ability, I mean, he was right there. So yeah, so that's it. I mean, Stetson Bennett, Georgia fans, sorry, he let you down, and he was your prize kid. He was a great story. He's the guy that you tried to run out. So just now you can go ahead and officially disown him if you want. He doesn't have any eligibility left. You tried to get him benched on several occasions, and you weren't able to do that. How much does this hurt his standing with Georgia fans? Because I look at a guy like Buck Bellew, who, to my knowledge, didn't have any issues with the law. Of course, back in his day, he played with Herschel Walker. They turned a blind eye to a lot of these things, and they didn't have body cameras where you had to report stuff. But here's Buck Bellew, who has a great job at 680 The Fan, where he shows up for a couple hours, talks about sports, and rolls on his merry way, and makes a pretty good dime doing it. And that's the kind of thing that former players need to remember, is that, and current players, keep your nose clean while you're there, work hard, and if you're in an SEC program, you might not make the NFL. You might not make the NFL, but you're going to have a pretty cush job waiting for you. So I wonder how Stetson Bennett will be viewed after this arrest, because this is a little bit embarrassing. And I made the comparison to Johnny Manziel, and I made the comparison to Baker Mayfield. Now, that's obviously a big, huge monster spectrum. I mean, Johnny Manziel completely melted down, was on drugs, was going to day parties in Vegas, and looked like he lost 100 of 200 pounds. And you do have Baker Mayfield, who's still competing in the NFL, and probably his cockiness hasn't helped him at all. But I tell you one thing that I really like about Hendon Hooker in that regard is that there are going to be challenges. There are going to be challenges when you're that guy. And Brock Purdy was that guy, and he led his team, the 49ers, all the way to the conference championship yesterday. Joshua Dobbs was that guy, Caleb, at one point, that faced challenges by not getting on the field. And it's how you respond to it. So it's not the end for Stetson Bennett, but if you had to predict which end of the scale he's on, Johnny Manziel being on one, and then Baker Mayfield still fighting, straighten his attitude up from all that I hear, where do you think Stetson Bennett is on that scale?
From Baker Mayfield to Hendon Hooker?
No, from Johnny Manziel is a one. He didn't handle it well at all. Baker Mayfield has had his struggles, but is still handling it.
Oh, okay. I would say he's closer to the Baker Mayfield range. I would say 4 or 5. I just think that this type of arrest is much more devastating for him than it would be for a Baker Mayfield or Johnny Manziel, both of whom won the Heisman, had more physical gifts, and were a lot younger than Stetson Bennett when they entered the league. And Johnny Manziel, you're right. Which Johnny Manziel scandal are we talking about? He rubbed the league's face in it too. He was a wannabe Joe Namath, and never really made it to that level. So
yeah, and he's not, because I mean Joe Namath. If you go back and read about Joe Willie, I mean he could do a 360 dunk back in the 60s. And I remember there was one coach that like offered him for football on the spot when he saw him do that. He was an incredible athlete before his knees gave way. So he's not going to be anywhere in that regard. That's the thing, that if I'm picking between, let's say I'm sitting somewhere at, I think Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett will be that second tier quarterback. And usually the second tier quarterback is kind of like a bit of a poker game going on. It's like, I want to take him, don't want to take him too high. Want to take him, don't want to take him too high. And if I have to choose between the two, Caleb, I'm going to go with Hendon Hooker. Although Stetson Bennett's probably a better overall thrower athletically, as far as running the football, they're probably pretty close to the same. But I feel like Hendon Hooker's really well grounded. Somebody tweeted me over the weekend and said he was coming out of jail while Hendon Hooker was at church. Well, I don't know that's necessarily the case, and it's probably oversimplifying it. But there is some truth to that. I feel like that Joshua Dobbs and Hendon Hooker have one common theme, and that the upstairs, the mental capability to handle the bumps in the road that are going to come with any player in the NFL, any player, that Hendon Hooker is much more set from a mentality standpoint to handle that than Stetson Bennett. I'll be honest with you. Before he decided not to go to the Senior Bowl, before the arrest on Saturday night, Sunday morning, I would have taken Stetson Bennett if I were an NFL team. After what I have seen, I would have taken him over Hendon Hooker. I would take Hendon Hooker. I would take Hendon Hooker if I'm sitting in that third round and I want a potential project quarterback, or I need a quarterback, just like the Brock Purdy thing, taking him late, maybe grows and blossoms into something. I'm taking Hendon Hooker over Stetson Bennett. How about you?
yeah, I am too. And I think we've seen enough evidence too that quarterbacks can somewhat learn a system fairly quickly if they have the right intangibles and work ethic, and can improve fairly quickly. I mean, honestly, that's a tale as old as time, because who would have thought watching, Tom Brady at Michigan in '99 that he would be ready to step in for the Patriots in 2001 and lead them to a Super Bowl? Well, that had all to do with what was right upstairs and nothing else. And you're right. I have much more faith in Hendon Hooker for that than Stetson Bennett. Skipping the Senior Bowl seems like a bigger deal to me, but you're right. Skipping the Senior Bowl, getting wasted in Dallas when you should, this is the most important time of your career right now. Like, just this 3 months, we always talk about, Stephen A. Smith always does to stay off the weed rant. And it's not like it's not like he's ranting against marijuana. It's, why are you jeopardizing your future to do certain things at certain times? If you're Stetson Bennett, you're jeopardizing your future to go get wasted in Dallas for a weekend. Like, I don't care that you're getting wasted. It's just, it's like Stephen A. says when he's like, I've never seen a joint worth $5 million, because that's what it might cost you if you get, fall in the draft and get suspended. I've never remembered a night of getting wasted worth $5 to $10 million. I don't know one. I don't know one that's worth $5 to $10 million to spend on, because that's what you might cost yourself.
Yeah, and it's funny getting to know Jacob and Cooper like I have. I mean, they have a maturity that I didn't have at that age, and they realize what's at stake for them. And I've never asked them specifically if they've had a beer. That's none of my business. But you just get the feeling that the party vibe that used to be around the 80s and 90s, and even to some extent early 2000s football, has been replaced by a more professional vibe of these guys coming up through travel teams and groups and working out in the summer, that they realize what's at stake. And for Stetson Bennett not to realize that at his age, is he 26? Is that right?
25.
To not realize that is just befuddling. I mean, and I know Tom Brady's playing until he's 82 years old, but the chances are most quarterbacks won't. So then you have to ask yourself, how many years do you get out of him? I just don't understand why he would. And I'm speaking with maturity of an older man, and you're older than a high school or a college athlete. But I just don't understand when you've got all that laying out in front of you, and you've got this 4-month span You've got this 3-4 month span where you can get yourself ready for the NFL draft. And it's not just that contract, it's the second contract. So that's what you need to be thinking. But you don't get a second shot at that. If you do a really bad job as, I don't know, a landscaper, you can incorporate that puppy. You can declare bankruptcy and start a new landscaping company the next day. And you don't have that luxury as an athlete because the clock is always ticking. So, Caleb, to me, that was the really disheartening, disappointing part about Stetson Bennett over the weekend. Now, here's the other thing. Why is that so public? Because he's cocky on the field. And people like to see people that are cocky get knocked down a peg. And I don't have a problem with him being cocky on the field, but the reaction to him I thought was really strong over the weekend. So hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we certainly want you to do that. We're working on getting Fred White on board, so we'll do that here momentarily. And Travis said, remember when Georgia fans made the shirts with Ainge mug shots on them? I do remember that. And I mean, I thought that was pretty tacky at the time. But let's be real honest. Eric likes to poke the bear, and he doesn't pretend to be a journalist. He's the guy that sits down in front of a mic and says whatever comes to his mind. And a lot of times he likes to get a reaction. And he called Stetson Bennett a punk earlier this year, I guess just a few weeks ago. And that made news. So I guess in his mindset, in his world, that's the right thing to do to get more attention. But yeah, Stetson Bennett to me before the weekend came across as a guy that had a good chip on his shoulder, a guy that fought hard, a guy that got it done when it mattered. And now if I'm an NFL team, I'm reevaluating his position altogether. It's more than just a black mark. At that age, if he were 20, okay, if he were Warren Sapp who got busted for marijuana and dropped to the 18th pick, I believe it was. If he were Laramie Tunsil, that the bong mask was out and he's 21 years old, that's something else. But you're a 25-year-old man, and you're going through you're going through this, and you're finding yourself beating on doors to the point that the cops are coming. And then this is the crazy part. I'm not saying avoid the cops, Caleb, but when when the cops come, you need to put your head down and start walking the other way, not running, but walking the other way. When the cops question you, it needs to be yes, sir, no, sir. And there's something about Stetson Bennett's on-field persona that makes me very curious if that was the case. In fact, doubtful that was the case.
Yeah, I agree. There's and you're right. It was about his arrogance to a certain degree, of a chip on your shoulder arrogance. But then you do this and you humiliated yourself. It's very similar to we all watched the AFC Championship game last night. Cincinnati did a lot of talking before that game last night. And, I mean, you saw where the city decided to jokingly do a paternity test to see if Joe Burrow was Patrick Mahomes' father.
Oh,
and
all right.
Yes, because they haven't lost to Kansas City before last night. I'm with you. I don't mind cocky. I don't mind talking a lot of trash. But you better back it up, because you deserve every bit of smoke you're going to get if you talk that trash and you don't deliver. And that's on the field. And Stetson Bennett honestly talked a lot of trash for a quarterback that, overachieved, but was also with a really, really loaded team. I mean, a loaded team.
Yeah, he was standing on third, and he thought he hit a triple.